What happens when one of Britain's most beloved actresses sits down for what should be a friendly chat and instead faces a barrage of disrespectful questions that cross every line imaginable? In just 34 seconds, a single cruel comment would shatter the fake smiles and expose the ugliest side of daytime television, leading to a walkout that nobody saw coming. Emma Thompson arrived at the Loose Women's studio that morning with a warm smile and genuine excitement. She had a new film to promote, a beautiful drama about family and forgiveness that she had poured her heart into. The audience clapped as she walked onto the set, waving cheerfully. She hugged each of the panelists and settled into her seat, adjusting the microphone clip to her elegant blazer. Denise Welch sat across from her, shuffling her notes with a strange smirk on her face. The other panelists looked ready to ask thoughtful questions about Emma's career and her new project, but Denise had other plans. "So Emma, lovely to have you here," Denise began, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Before we talk about your little film, I have to ask about something that's been on everyone's minds." Emma's smile faltered slightly. "Of course, what would you like to know?" Denise leaned forward, eyes gleaming. "Well, you've been in this industry for decades now. You're what, 65, 66? And you're still taking roles that, frankly, younger actresses could play much better. Don't you think it's a bit selfish?" The studio went silent. The audience shifted uncomfortably. The other panelists looked at each other with wide eyes. Emma blinked, clearly taken aback. "I'm sorry, what exactly are you suggesting?" Emma asked, her voice calm but strained. "I'm just saying." Denise continued with a shrug. "There are so many talented young women out there desperate for opportunities, and here you are, still clinging to the spotlight. Some might call that greedy." Emma took a breath, composing herself. "Well, Denise, I don't see acting as something you age out of. Meryl Streep is still working. Judi Dench is still working. We tell stories about all kinds of people at all stages of life." "Yes, but they're them," Denise interrupted, waving her hand dismissively. "Look, I'm just being honest here. The camera isn't as kind as it used to be, is it? I mean, we can all see the wrinkles, the sagging. Don't you think audiences want to see fresh faces instead of, well, someone who looks like their grandmother?" One of the other panelists tried to jump in. "Denise, I don't think that's really fair to say." But Denise talked right over her. "Oh, come on, we're all thinking it. Emma, you've had a wonderful career, truly. But isn't there a point where you should step aside gracefully? Let the next generation have their turn?" Emma's jaw tightened. Her hands gripped the armrests of her chair. "I work because I love what I do. I have stories to tell. And frankly, the suggestion that women should disappear from screens once they reach a certain age is exactly the kind of outdated, misogynistic nonsense that we should be fighting against, not promoting." "Misogynistic?" Denise laughed, a harsh, mocking sound. "Oh, please. I'm a woman too, darling. I'm just being realistic. Hollywood is a young person's game. Always has been. You had your time. Why not retire to some nice cottage somewhere and enjoy your grandchildren?" "I don't have grandchildren," Emma replied coldly, "and even if I did, that wouldn't mean my career should be over." Denise rolled her eyes dramatically. "Look at you getting all defensive. I'm trying to have an honest conversation here about ageism, and you're acting like I've personally attacked you." "You have personally attacked me," Emma shot back, her voice rising slightly. "You've insulted my appearance, questioned my right to work, and suggested I should disappear from public life because of my age. How is that not a personal attack?" The audience began murmuring. Some people looked angry. Others looked deeply uncomfortable. The camera operators didn't know where to point their lenses. Denise wasn't backing down. "I'm a journalist. I ask tough questions. If you can't handle a little criticism, maybe you shouldn't be doing interviews." "There's a difference between tough questions and cruelty," Emma said firmly. "Asking me about my creative process is a tough question. Asking me about the themes in my film is a tough question. Telling me I look like someone's grandmother and should retire is just mean-spirited." "Well, maybe if you weren't so sensitive," Denise snapped. "Honestly, your generation is always going on about respect and dignity, but you can't take any real feedback." "Feedback?" Emma repeated, incredulous. "You think telling someone they're too old and too ugly to work is feedback?" Denise scoffed. "I never said ugly. Don't put words in my mouth. You said the camera isn't kind to me anymore. You said audiences don't want to see someone who looks like their grandmother. What else could that possibly mean?" Emma's voice was shaking now, with anger rather than hurt. One of the other panelists tried again to intervene. "Maybe we should talk about Emma's new film. It sounds like a beautiful project." But Denise ignored her completely. keeping her focus locked on Emma. You know what your problem is? You're so used to everyone worshiping you, treating you like royalty, that you can't handle it when someone tells you the truth. The truth. Emma's eyes flashed. Or your opinion dressed up as truth? Same thing in this case, Denise said with a cruel smile. Look, I've been in this industry long enough to know how it works. You're past your prime. That's not an insult, it's just a fact. And the sooner you accept that, the better off you'll be. Emma stood up abruptly, the movement so sudden that her chair scraped loudly against the floor. The audience gasped. The other panelists froze. I don't have to sit here and listen to this, Emma said, her voice clear and strong. She began unclipping her microphone. Denise's eyes widened, but she tried to play it off with another laugh. Oh, are we really doing this? You're going to storm off like a diva because someone dared to be honest with you? No, Emma replied, pulling the microphone free and setting it carefully on the chair. I'm leaving because you've been disrespectful, unprofessional, and frankly vicious for no reason whatsoever. I came here to talk about a film that means a great deal to me, and instead you've spent the entire time attacking my age and appearance. I was just making conversation, Denise protested weakly. That wasn't conversation, that was bullying. Emma picked up her handbag from beside her chair. And I have better things to do with my time than sit here while you tear me down to make yourself feel important. The other panelists looked mortified. One of them reached out as if to stop Emma, but didn't quite dare touch her. Emma, please, we'd love to hear about your film. Emma softened slightly when she looked at her. I appreciate that, truly, but I can't stay on this panel with someone who thinks it's acceptable to speak to people this way. She turned back to Denise. You know, I actually used to respect you. I thought you were brave and outspoken. But there's a difference between being honest and being cruel. You've crossed that line today. Denise's face flushed red. How dare you lecture me about crossing lines? You don't know anything about me or what I've been through. And you don't know anything about me, Emma replied evenly. Yet you felt perfectly comfortable making sweeping judgments about my career, my appearance, and my worth based on nothing but my age. You owe me an apology. An apology? Denise sputtered. For what? For being honest? For being cruel, Emma corrected. But I can see you're not capable of that right now, so I'm going to leave. She began walking toward the exit. Denise called after her, her voice getting shriller. Fine, run away, prove my point. This is exactly the kind of entitled behavior I was talking about. Emma stopped and turned around one last time. The cameras caught the look on her face, a mixture of disappointment and anger. Entitled? I'm entitled because I won't sit here and be insulted on national television? You've invited me onto your show as a guest, and you've treated me with nothing but contempt from the moment I sat down. That's not journalism. That's not being honest. That's just being nasty. I think you're overreacting, Denise said, but her voice wavered slightly. And I think you know exactly what you did, Emma replied. I think you decided before I even got here that you were going to make this interview about my age instead of my work. I think you wanted to create a moment, get some headlines, maybe go viral. Well, congratulations. You got your moment. I hope it was worth it. The audience had gone completely silent. Some people were recording on their phones, despite the studio rules against it. The producers were frantically gesturing from the wings, unclear whether they should cut to commercial or let this play out. Denise tried one more time. Emma, sit down. Let's start over. No, Emma said simply. I'm done. But let me say one thing before I go. To anyone watching this who has ever been made to feel like they're too old, too fat, too thin, too anything to pursue their dreams, please don't listen to voices like this. Your age doesn't diminish your value. Your appearance doesn't define your worth. And you absolutely do not have to shrink yourself to make other people comfortable. She looked directly at Denise. I've won 2 Academy Awards. I've worked with the greatest directors in cinema. I've had a career spanning 4 decades, and I'm nowhere near done. If you think a few cruel comments from someone I don't even respect are going to make me question any of that, you're very much mistaken. With that, she turned and walked off the set. Her heels clicked on the floor, each step purposeful and dignified. The door closed behind her with a soft thud that somehow felt louder than a slam. The remaining panelists sat in stunned silence. Denise tried to regain control, shuffling her papers and clearing her throat. Well, that was certainly dramatic. I suppose some people just can't handle real talk. But one of the other panelists cut her off. Denise, that was completely out of line. Emma was right. That wasn't real talk. That was just cruel. Oh, not you two, Denise groaned. I'm so tired of everyone being so sensitive. It's not about being sensitive, another panelist jumped in. It's about basic respect. We invited her here as a guest. You attacked her personally from the start. Denise's face grew redder. I asked legitimate questions about ageism in Hollywood. No, you made ageist comments to her face and then acted surprised when she got upset. The first panelist countered. There's a difference between discussing ageism in the industry and telling someone they look like a grandmother and should retire. The audience began clapping in agreement. Denise looked around, clearly not expecting this reaction. We need to go to commercial, someone said from off camera, and the show abruptly cut away. But back in the green room, Emma was gathering her things, her hands still trembling slightly with adrenaline. A production assistant hovered nearby, looking worried. Miss Thompson, I'm so sorry about what happened out there. Is there anything I can get you? Emma smiled at her, a genuine smile this time. No, thank you, dear. I'm quite all right. Just disappointed, that's all. For what it's worth, the young woman said quietly, I think what you said out there was really important. My mom is in her 60s and she's always talking about feeling invisible. She's going to love hearing what you said. Emma's expression softened. Well, tell your mom from me that she's not invisible. None of us are. Meanwhile, back on set, the show had returned from commercial, but the atmosphere had completely changed. The other panelists had clearly decided they weren't going to let Denise's behavior slide. Before we continue, one of them said to the camera, I think we need to address what just happened. Emma Thompson is a brilliant actress and a lovely person, and she deserved better than what she received today. Denise, I think you owe her an apology. Denise's mouth fell open. On air? You're doing this on air? You attacked her on air, the panelist replied calmly. So yes, this conversation is happening on air. I didn't attack her, Denise insisted. I asked her questions. You told her she was too old to act. You made comments about her appearance. You suggested she should retire, another panelist listed off. How is that not an attack? Denise looked around wildly, as if searching for support that wasn't coming. I was trying to have a real conversation about the issues facing older women in entertainment. Then you should have talked about the issues, not made Emma the target, the first panelist said. There's a way to discuss ageism without being ageist yourself. The audience applauded again, louder this time. Denise's hands clenched into fists on the table. Fine, she said through gritted teeth. Fine. Maybe I was a bit harsh. A bit? Someone in the audience called out. Denise glared in that direction. I said what I said because I believe it's true. The industry is youth-obsessed, and someone needs to talk about it. Then talk about the industry, the panelists pushed back. Don't make it personal. Don't tell individual women they're too old or not attractive enough. That's not fighting ageism. That's perpetuating it. Denise stood up abruptly. You know what? I don't need this. I'm entitled to my opinions. And Emma was entitled to leave when those opinions became personal attacks. The panelists responded without missing a beat. The show descended into chaos then, with Denise arguing with her fellow panelists, the audience getting more vocal, and the producers clearly regretting every decision that had led to this moment. In a taxi heading away from the studio, Emma looked out the window at the London streets passing by. Her phone was already buzzing with messages, texts from friends and colleagues who had seen clips online, calls from her publicist, emails from journalists wanting a statement. She turned the phone off and dropped it into her bag. She had said everything she needed to say. She had stood up for herself with dignity and grace. And she had spoken truth to cruelty. And most importantly, she had walked away from a situation that didn't serve her, from a person who didn't respect her, and from a conversation that was designed to diminish rather than celebrate. Back at the studio, the episode continued to spiral. The remaining panelists were barely speaking to Denise. The audience was restless and clearly on Emma's side. Social media was already exploding with reactions, almost universally condemning Denise's behavior and praising Emma's response. Denise sat rigidly in her chair, her face a mask of forced composure, but anyone could see the cracks forming. She had wanted to create a moment, to be provocative, to get people talking. She had succeeded, just not in the way she had hoped, because the story wouldn't be about Emma Thompson being too old or too sensitive. The story would be about Emma Thompson standing up to a bully, speaking out against ageism and cruelty, and refusing to tolerate disrespect. The story would be about how grace under pressure looks, how dignity in the face of attacks sounds, and how strength shows up when someone tries to make you feel small. Emma Thompson had come to promote a film about forgiveness, and she had ended up teaching a lesson about self-respect instead. She had shown that you can be kind without being a doormat, that you can be professional without accepting abuse, and that walking away from toxicity isn't weakness, it's wisdom. And Denise Welch had learned, in front of millions of viewers, that being provocative isn't the same as being brave, that being honest isn't an excuse for being cruel, and that some lines, once crossed, can't be uncrossed. The cameras kept rolling, but the damage was done. The interview that was supposed to be a pleasant promotional chat had become a masterclass in what not to do, a cautionary tale about the difference between journalism and bullying, and a reminder that everyone, regardless of age or status, deserves to be treated with basic human respect. Emma's words would be quoted for days afterward. Her composure would be praised. Her decision to walk away would be celebrated as an act of self-preservation and strength. And Denise's cruel comments would follow her, a permanent stain on her reputation. A moment that defined her not as the brave truth-teller she imagined herself to be, but as someone who mistook meanness for honesty and cruelty for courage. In that 34 seconds when Denise had made that final cruel comment about Emma looking like someone's grandmother, she had sealed her own fate. She had revealed herself completely, stripped away any pretense of professional journalism, and shown the world exactly who she was. And Emma, in walking away with her head held high, had shown the world exactly who she was too. Two women, two very different responses to the same moment. One chose cruelty, one chose dignity, and the audience, both in the studio and watching at home, knew exactly which one they respected.